This is A Rude Awakening. I'm Sabrina Jacobs. On today's show, has Africa's Green Revolution reduced hunger or made things worse? I'll speak with Timothy A. Wise and Muntinta Nkatani on AGRA, Gates Foundation funding, and the fight for food sovereignty. But first, the news.
I'm Max Pringle with these headlines. The death toll in Nepal's catastrophic floods has climbed to at least 538 as rescue crews continue to look for survivors. More from Rebecca Bunden in Kathmandu.
We know that roads, bridges have been washed away, entire villages, so that makes it all the more challenging. There's also been rain, so the weather conditions have been difficult. So that's really the big challenge, working in these kind of conditions. The geographical terrain is challenging at the best of times with very, very narrow roads. Now some of those roads are blocked or even destroyed. So that's the big problem. Teams have been working. It's also a safety risk for those involved in those rescue operations.
That's Rebecca Bunden. President Trump signed an executive order Thursday renaming Lake Ontario as Lake America. It's the latest move in the ongoing trade war with Canada. The U.S. and Canada have levied new tariffs on each other's imports worth billions of dollars. Canada says it will continue to call it Lake Ontario. Jagrute Darve has more.
Donald Trump signed an executive order making the name change effective immediately, and he was asked in the Oval Office by a reporter what message he's sending to Canadians, and he said that it's happening because he says Canada feels entitled. He says they don't pay for anything and they want to be treated like a state, but they're not a state. He suggested Canada was worse than China to do trade with, and at the same time, all this as escalating tensions on trade between the two sides. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick was also talking to reporters, and he repeated the U.S. position that Canada was going to have the best deal in the world.
That's Jagrute Darve. New Federal Reserve Chair Kevin Warsh said today that inflation is still too high and the Fed may have to raise interest rates in the coming months to deal with it. He made the remarks in his first major address today on the state of the economy in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, at the Fed's annual economic symposium.
Now, there is one signal nobody can miss. The responsibility for 65 months of sustained elevated inflation sits squarely with the central bank, and that's where it belongs.
A federal judge has ruled in favor of artificial intelligence company Anthropic in its legal battle against the Pentagon. The government labeled the company a supply chain risk earlier this year. U.S. District Judge Rita Lynn issued a written order last night stating the Pentagon acted illegally by punishing Anthropic for criticizing the Department of Defense's views on AI use. The dispute began in February when President Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth accused Anthropic of endangering national security. The government is expected to fight the ruling. Anthropic says it welcomes the decision and remains focused on working with the government. Today marks 6 months since the U.S. and Israel launched a war with Iran that's showing no signs of ending anytime soon. The war came after talks to end Iran's nuclear program broke down. President Trump initially told Americans it would last only a matter of weeks. Trump claims the war has devastated Iran's leadership, military, and economy. This week, his administration shifted its focus to increasing economic pressure rather than military strikes. Trump says he's not in a hurry to bring Iran back to negotiations. Mediators like Qatar and Pakistan continue to seek diplomatic solutions. Analysts warn that Iran has shown resilience to international pressure, and it remains to be seen how far the U.S. will go with its new strategy. Iran has effectively shut down the important Strait of Hormuz waterway, from which 20% of the world's oil is shipped. A federal judge is once again blocking President Trump's executive order that seeks to limit mail voting in the midterm elections. U.S. District Court Judge Indira Talwani put a new 14-day hold on the plan following a fresh round of lawsuits just days before mail ballots begin to go out. The case could be headed back to the Supreme Court, which sided with Trump earlier this week. The justices on Monday found Talwani had acted prematurely, but they did not rule on the legality of Trump's order. The back-and-forth legal battle has major ramifications for the midterm elections. Norway has a new king. Crown Prince Haakon has ascended to the throne following the death of his father, King Harald V. His daughter becomes Crown Princess Ingrid Alexandra and heir to the throne. Norway's constitutional monarchy limits the king's role to a largely ceremonial one, as political power lies with an elected parliament, but the country's royal family retains celebrity and a role in promoting the wealthy nation across the world. Haakon's tasks will include stabilizing the Scandinavian country's monarchy and the royal family's popularity after his wife's past contacts with deceased sex offender Jeffrey Epstein and his stepson's rape conviction. The timber fire has grown to more than 23,000 acres in Monterey County and remains only about 21% contained as of Thursday evening. That's according to CAL FIRE. That is an increase of about 6,900 acres, or approximately 42.6%, from the roughly 16,000 acres reported earlier this week. Parts of Highway 1 remain closed. The closure covers approximately 40 miles and will remain in place until further notice. There is no estimated time for the highway to reopen. Meanwhile, CAL FIRE reports that the Plaskett Fire in Monterey County has grown to about 1,700 acres and remains 0% contained as of last night. Partly cloudy today in the San Francisco Bay Area, highs in the 70s, lows tonight in the 50s. In the Central Valley, partly sunny, highs in the 80s, lows tonight in the 60s. In the LA area, sunny today, highs in the 90s, lows in the 70s. Those are the headlines. I'm Max Pringle on KPFA.
Welcome back. We are back. This is A Rude Awakening. I'm Sabrina Jacobs. Folks, if you've been listening to A Rude Awakening over the last 6 years or so, then you've heard our ongoing coverage of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the not-for-profit organization formerly known as AGRA, the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa. Now, for listeners who may be new to the story, here's some quick background. In 2006, the Gates Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation came together and put up $150 million to get AGRA off the ground and started. And they started the scheme and roped all these people into it, including former United Nations Secretary General Kofi Annan. And I just found that out a couple of days ago, so I'm actually floored by that. But anyway, the promise that they made was to cut hunger in half by 2020 through agricultural techno fixes, forcing smallholder farmers to abandon their thousands-year-old, time-proven agroecological practices. They were able to invade 13 African countries over the last 20 years. And what did these 13 African countries end up with? More hungry citizens than they had before. So fast forward to now, nearly 2 decades later, donors are gearing up to gather in Kigali, Rwanda for the 20th Africa Food System Forum, hosted by none other than AGRA. And they are actually getting together to pat each other on the backs, gathering to say job well done. But for who? The data is there and it cannot be denied. There is more hunger in Africa, or in these 13 African countries, than before AGRA existed. So the questions are, who's been benefiting from this scheme? Who keeps selling this propaganda? And who is buying into the lie? Here to talk about it is friend of the show, Timothy A. Wise. And for those of you who need a reminder, Timothy A. Wise is a senior research fellow at Tufts University Global Development and Environment Institute. He is the author of the New Green Revolution Assessment, entitled Requiem for Africa's Green Revolution. He wrote the book Eating Tomorrow: Agribusiness, Family, Farmers, and the Battle for the Future of Food. That was published by the New Press in 2019. Timothy A. Wise, welcome back.
Hi, Sabrina. It's great to be back with you.
Yes, I can't wait to get this discussion going. So, Tim, we're going to have you give us some background and, most importantly, the data. And guess what, folks? We also have Mutinta Nkatani. And Miss Nkatani, she is the national coordinator for ZAAB, and that's the Zambia Alliance for Agroecology and Biodiversity. Miss Nkatani coordinates ZAAB's advocacy network of farmers, faith, and civil society organizations promoting agroecology, seed sovereignty, and GMO-free food systems in Zambia. She was a co-author on the 2020 assessment of AGRA and will be a part of a delegation from the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa to AGRA's Africa Food System Forum in Kigali, Rwanda next week. So excited to have you here. Welcome to A Rude Awakening, Mutinta Nkatani.
Thank you so much, Sabrina. Good morning, listeners.
Yes, 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 yes. So Ms. Nkatani will give us insight into what is happening in Zambia specifically, Zambia being one of the 13 African countries that AGRA has been occupying. But we're going to start with Tim. So Tim, you just updated your 2020 evaluation of AGRA and the Green Revolution for Africa. So what does the new data show?
The new data confirms the same trends that we saw in 2020, and actually shows that things have gotten worse, not better. In the 6 additional years we were able to gather data. AGRA is kind of proudly celebrating its 20th anniversary with kind of victory tour type events in different countries, and we really wanted to, the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa in particular wanted to counter that with some new data. So what the new data shows, adding the 6 years of UN data on yields, productivity, and hunger for a variety of key food crops, is the yields have grown even more slowly in the last 6 years. A growth rate of 0.3% in the last 6 years. Even the priority crop of maize, and we know it as corn, has seen really slow yield growth. So the productivity revolution hasn't happened, and we confirm that it hasn't happened. In fact, it's kind of shocking that the rate of yield growth was higher in the 12 years before AGRA came on the scene, and billions of dollars were poured into seeds and fertilizers and promotion in these 13 countries. Yields were higher before that than they have been since all that money's been poured in. A real record of failure. That's brought with it eroded crop and diet diversity, as promoted crops like maize and rice and soybeans displace traditional crops like millet and sorghum. And that's alarming, particularly in Zambia. You can really see these trends. Chinta can talk more about that. It creates declining climate resilience for farmers, because when the maize fails, if they're pushed into monocultures of maize with seeds they have to buy every year, fertilizer they have to buy every year, a drought comes and they don't have anything. The maize dies and they don't have anything else to eat because they're not growing any other crops. And the other alarming finding was just how unsustainable the land use is. The whole idea of the Green Revolution goes under the banner of the kind of techie banner of sustainable intensification. Intensification meaning you're trying to grow more food from the same land without pushing onto new lands. So you apply commercial seeds, fertilizers, chemicals, and you get more food out of the same land. And that's supposed to be good for the environment. And instead, what all those subsidies to those inputs has done is push farmers to expand onto new land. So we saw a 46% rise in cultivated land in these 13 countries under AGRA, higher than the yield growth. So it's pushing unsustainable practices in land use. And then the most alarming finding in the study is just how dramatically hunger has risen. The number of undernourished people in agri countries was supposed to go down by half. It's gone up by 58% by 2024. So this is a program that is failing on every measure.
Mm-hmm. So let me break it down into super layman's terms, because it's I want to make sure I heard you right. So they're cultivating more land, but there's less yield. There's less food coming out of that land that they've been cultivating, that extra land that they've been cultivating.
It's that the promise of plowing, high yield seeds and fertilizers, giving them to farmers, that it would allow their farms, their existing land, to be more productive, hasn't happened. And instead, what's happened is farmers see those subsidies and they want the subsidies. And usually it's richer farmers go out onto the land that they can occupy and plant new land in crops that they can get the subsidies for. So instead of encouraging productivity growth, which would be a good thing, it's encouraging expansion onto new lands, which has all kinds of environmental implications.
Wow. Okay. So let's drill down on Zambia specifically. Talk to us about the data, the snapshot that you have of Zambia's data as far as their yields or lack thereof.
Yeah, I mean, Mutinta can talk about the short snapshot of Zambia is that it shows all of these trends
Mhm.
in a spotlight. I mean, they've had huge increase in maize production, but trivial growth in yields, in spite of being the country with the highest level of fertilizer use of any agri country, any of those 13 countries. So all that and all those subsidies to fertilizer have produced is a near doubling of land under cultivation. So just that trend I was talking about.
Mhm.
And the number of hungry people has gone up. All that maize isn't feeding more people. The number of hungry people has gone up by a third.
All right. So Mutita, Mutinta, that this hasn't translated into any kind of productivity. It surely hasn't translated into any type of food security for the Zambian people, for the farmers. Um, give us your reasoning. Why do you think that is? You're on the ground, you're there, you're seeing it. Talk to us about what's been going on the last 20 years with this whole Agra scheme.
Yeah, so the reason this system has failed is exactly what Tim has said about the expansion of the area under cultivation for maize. And in recent years, particularly with government's focus on soybean and wheat, which in most cases does not speak to what the people's needs are in terms of food. So the main reason it has failed is the lack of diversification. There is no diversification in our green revolution systems, and these monocultures are feeding nations with carbohydrates, and that is why the malnutrition levels are actually, the malnutrition indicators are showing that we are not doing well in terms of producing and consuming food. The other reason that it has failed is the extensive use of chemicals. You'll find that there's a lot of chemicals that are under use and most of these are depleting the soils and the environment. So while we continue to expand, the soils continue to be depleted. We keep losing our biodiversity because of the opening up of new areas. We keep using chemicals that are killing off our pollinators, that are killing off other life forms, that are killing the biology in the soil. We keep using methods that undermine nature's ability to restore itself and be able to produce food. And most of all, we are producing monocultures that just, every time they reinforce everything that I've talked about: depletion of soils, loss of biodiversity, both in terms of our natural biodiversity and the agro biodiversity. It reinforces the rapid loss of forests and everything else. In the end, we have a monoculture that is able to deliver, yes, on lots and lots of carbohydrates, lots of cereal and other grain, but not entirely speaking to the food needs of the country. This system has also failed because despite heavy investment in it, when you look at how much money, for example, the Zambian agriculture sector government, in some years it goes to over 80% of this, the budget going to the farmer input support program, which is a government subsidy. You will still find that the farmers are locked onto a system that, by and large, keeps them indebted to this system. So while a lot of resources are pumped into the system, like I said, almost 80%, and in most years over 80%, this system still leaves the country hungrier, farmers much more in debt than they were before. Even the country, by the way, borrows in order to sustain this system. And it is not working. We believe it shouldn't continue like this.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. Can you speak to us about how the Green Revolution, how AGRA's, the scheme, has undermined farmers' resilience to climate change? And also, I should reference the food system collapse in the 2024 drought.
Yes, so the Center for African Biodiversity, SCB, had reported in 2024 that the food system in Zambia was actually collapsing. And it did, because when you look at what happened in 2020, during the 2023 to 2024 farming season, everybody agrees that that was not a failure or a crop failure, as people put it, but a failure of maize. Because we grow so much maize that when that one crop fails, we are starving. The whole country is starving. We don't have enough food for the rural communities. The price of food goes up in the country. So you see that previously and under agroecological systems, our forefathers would grow more than one crop. They would grow maize, they would grow some millet, some sorghum, other foods as well, and legumes such as the cowpeas, groundnuts, and lentils as part of one cropping season. Pumpkins and sweet potatoes in Zambia were a very big part of our diet. But unfortunately, and especially in our case, with the introduction of the herbicides together with the farmer input support package, this has really, the harvest or the yields for pumpkins, sweet potatoes have drastically reduced in the last 10 years or so. So you find that this takes away the farmer's ability to survive a bad rain year, the ability to recover or to look elsewhere in case one crop fails. And because of this and the lock-in, because the government program, and because, like Tim said, our farmers love the program, they love the the subsidies that they get, and they kind of feel that they have to get onto the farmer input support program. And this has left them more dependent on maize for both food and cash. And sadly, in most years, inputs under this program arrive late in the season. There is no diversification, no room for local seeds, varieties that carried this country through the droughts before this program existed. And when one crop fails, it means that you are completely left without any, any base on which to recover or to start from as a farmer. So this model has really undermined, farmers' resilience, but it also doesn't speak to climate change. With changing climate in Zambia, you find that there are some regions like the southern region, which is getting drier, and other parts of the country. Sorghum and millet do survive better in these regions. But over the years, we have seen that the government programs are not responding at the same rate as these facts, even when they exist, even when there are so many researchers that have shown that sorghum and millet perform better in these drier regions, and that these drier regions actually need more investment in other agriculture infrastructure such as irrigation. In the end, we have one package for all regions, like one crop for all regions, and it's not working very well for most of the farmers. So it really undermines farmers' ability to build resilience at household and community levels.
My goodness. My goodness. So, Tim, according to your data, is that a generalized phenomena in Green Revolution countries? What Mutinta has just described?
It is. I mean, one of the striking numbers that came out of this most recent research is that the amount of land planted to maize, the crop that is most favored and subsidized by the Green Revolution, has gone up dramatically, something like 80% in these 20 years. A lot of that onto new land, and some of it taking land away from other crops, like Mutinta describes. Millet land has gone down dramatically as a result. That's people pulling their much more nutritious and climate resilient crop of millet to plant maize to capture the subsidies and to follow the dictates of the Green Revolution. And that is just a terrible thing for African climate resilience overall. Sorghum and millet, depending on the country, were equally or more important than maize before the Green Revolution came on the scene in 2006. And now maize is far more prominent, even in countries that didn't grow a lot of maize before, because that's what the subsidies were for. That's what farmers were told to plant. And as the food system collapse showed in Zambia, you're in a real vulnerable position if the only thing you grow is monocultures of maize and a drought comes.
Yeah, no doubt. You're kind of trapped there with that or in that type of situation. So in your report, you offer Senegal, Tim. You offer Senegal as a contrast where the country actually achieved AGRA's goal of cutting hunger in half. Describe this really quickly. How did Senegal do that? What did they do differently? I mean, did they mix the agri scheme with agroecology? I mean, how did Senegal pull that off?
It really deserves a lot more study. I haven't personally studied Senegal in detail, but I now really want to, because what jumps off the page is that as the Food and Agriculture Organization annually tracks hunger levels, the number of undernourished people, the percentage of undernourished people all around the globe. And here's the Agra countries as a group failing miserably to reduce hunger. A lot of people would say, and a lot of people do say, oh, well, Africa's beset by conflicts and Africa's beset by climate change, and there's a lot of corruption and all these other things. Well, right here in Africa, in Senegal, they cut hunger in half. They cut the number of hungry people in half. They reduced the percentage of hungry people to 5%, which was a goal of the African Union. And and um, and they did so with a much more diverse mix of policies. It's not like they didn't use fertilizers, but they used half the fertilizers Zambia does. They didn't use it all on maize. And what you see jumping off the page is just how they've nurtured crop diversity with a mix of policies that they do, some of which include formal government engagement in an agroecology initiative within the country. Where millet yields went down 17% in agri countries, they went up 85% in Senegal. Sorghum went up 75%. Groundnuts, which is we know them as peanuts, but that's really the Senegalese staple and source of protein. Yields went up 56%, where they went down 11% in agri countries. So this is just a much more diverse set of policies supporting a much greater diversity of crops, including traditional farmer crops, and pairing that with good social protection measures that have allowed, like school feeding programs, that have allowed them to dramatically reduce hunger, increase nutritional diversity with the crop diversity, and achieve what AGRA promised it would achieve, but doing it without doing what AGRA is telling it to do.
Interesting. So, Mutinta, so Tim, we're gonna have to wait to get more data on that and have another conversation in the future as far as Senegal is concerned, because it sounds
Yeah,
like
I'm really dying to get journalists in the region to dig into the Senegal model, but because of their sort of formal embracing of agroecology as one of the alternatives to the Green Revolution, there will start to be a lot more data on how those fields are doing and what that's producing. And so I think we will see a lot more coming out of Senegal.
Yeah, I definitely want to see. I want to know if they're using Roundup and all those other how they're using those techno fixes. But Muntinta, so is there anything you would like to add to this answer or to this question?
Yeah, so just to say that yes, there's a lot of Roundup that is being used in Zambia and Paraquat, and despite the governing agency called the Zambia Environmental Management Agency, knowing how toxic paraquat and glyphosate are, they actually insist that it would cause a food shortage if they removed some of these chemicals from the market, because then farmers would not be able to ask to carry out the activities as they do, because people are hooked onto these chemicals. So we are dealing with really a multifaceted challenge here.
Okay, so but let's talk about how AGRA in particular has interfered in Zambia's democratic efforts to move away from the failing Green Revolution model. Let's talk about how AGRA is getting involved in Zambia's political process in order to keep its hold on the agricultural system in Zambia. Go ahead.
Yeah. So in 2019, AGRA placed consultant in the Ministry of Agriculture. He was actually hired to he was given an office within the Ministry of Agriculture to advise government on the development of specific policy documents. And from 2019 and during in 2021, we were developing the second National Agriculture Investment Plan. You know, as countries, we are supposed to develop these, review them, and update them. And we were updating the first one, going on to the second National Agricultural Investment Plan. During this time, the process started in a very democratic way. Everybody was at the table. We carried out a review. Farmers, civil society organizations, livestock keepers, all stakeholders were, including cooperating partners, were actually involved in the process in the beginning. After the review, and we were not invited for the follow-up meetings because later on we found out they never took place. So AGRA hired the AGRA hired consultant, and another one that was paid for by GIZ actually were now hired to draft the second National Agricultural Investment Program, which is supposed to be a 5-year investment program, but in the end, it ended up being this big 10-year investment program that had no bearing on the real issues on the ground. When you look at what it, and they named it differently anyway, it's no longer the National Agriculture Investment Program, it's called the Comprehensive Agriculture Transformation Support Program, and it's been expanded to cover a 10-year period. And this one mainly, it was their role was to reorient the whole strategy towards commercial maize, wheat, and soya value chains. So we have a whole investment plan, 10-year, that speaks only to these and a few fruits. One of our contentions during the review of this big document was the fact that in Zambia, we do produce cashew nuts in the western region, and these are the fruits, these are the fruit value chains that we wanted to, the nuts value chain that we wanted to focus on as a country. Unfortunately, and I believe it is due to Chinese influence, we ended up with macadamia fruit, which we don't even know in this country. So mainly it's for export. We actually don't know these nuts, the macadamia nuts. We don't even consume them. If there are Zambians that consume them, there are very few. So these are some of the contentious issues that we had. And the fact that the whole document was drafted by 2 consultants. During the stakeholder consultations, when they were now popularizing this draft and for stakeholders to have an input into it, the only person that could explain the rationale, the whole framework was actually the AGRA consultant. Not even the technocrats in the ministry could explain the framework of the CATSIP. So during one of these consultations, and when we pushed back about how this is so silent about on smallholder farmers, one of the permanent secretaries in the ministry then, Mr. Binimbozi, even went further to say that it is okay if the inefficient smallholder farmers can be pushed out of agriculture to pave way for efficient commercial operations. And they expected that with this improved efficiency, the food prices would reduce, would achieve food security. But this is in a country where 80% of what we eat is grown by smallholder farmers. We have commercialized farms here, huge tracts of land that commercial farmers are given. and they grow wheat and maize and other crops for export. And for maize, they grow it mainly for the stock feed industry. So you can see that what that does is taking away resources and
Right.
investment from what the smallholder farmers and what we consider food should be produced to funding private capital investments. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Wow, wow, wow. Okay. Thank you for that, Muntita. So, that is the scheme. And this person, has an office at the Ministry of Agriculture, and he's dictating all this. Here's some land
Yes.
for some macadamia nuts for Chinese export. Here's some land. Okay, okay, and this my next question, my next obvious question, Mutita, is you are going to Kigali. You are going to Kigali, Rwanda, to this AFSA, or excuse me, to the Agra African Food System Forum. And you're going with colleagues from AFSA, uh, folks that you have been working with to be the check and balance of Agra. Can you share with us what message you hope to deliver? What is the message that you want to send to these people who are basically trying to recolonize Zambia and the other 13
Yes.
African countries? Go right ahead, talk to us.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
So in the at country level at Zambia, and I know that we are going to have a very big delegation from the government to this conference, to the forum. I think the key message from us as the Zambia Alliance for Agroecology and Biodiversity has always been that an organization that has failed its own goals with its own model has no authority to guide our policy. That is key because Agra was in Zambia between 2009 and 2016. And during that time, there is nothing. So like you had mentioned that the first report that Tim and I had written showed the gains that were made during that period, and there was nothing to talk about. So you cannot begin then to guide policy when you have failed in terms of implementation. Then as a collective, as AFSA, we do agree that African food systems must transform. That's a fact. Everywhere around the world, everybody's talking about how unsustainable how currently we are running activities in the food system is causing degradation, contributing to climate change, leaving people hungry, people dependent on plastic food and, highly processed food, and we need to transform. But we contend that the African food system transformation must be rooted in agroecology, food sovereignty, farmer-managed seed systems, indigenous knowledge, local markets and territorial economies, not the external investment models that are built around synthetic inputs, corporate partnerships, digital lock-in, and export-oriented production. We believe that farmers and all stakeholders, consumers, all national stakeholders must be part and parcel of this transformation. And agroecology is the framework that is able to achieve that.
Indeed, indeed. That is the only way. So, Tim, Agra's former president, is quoted as saying that Agra took the words Green Revolution out of its name in 2022 because the Green Revolution ship has sailed. So, what is she talking about? What does that mean? What does she mean?
Well, it's a remarkable, I think she might have meant it as kind of a throwaway line because when they changed their name, when they pulled Green Revolution from their name in 2022, it was because their results had been so bad and their reputation was so tarnished. But they never explained why they took Green Revolution out of their name. They just said heretofore we'll be known as AGRA just by our initials. And it's a rebranding and nothing to talk about. Finally, in 2025, Agnes Kalibata, the longtime president, was asked why they rebranded, and she said, "Oh, the Green Revolution ship has sailed." Actually, the full quote goes, "We can't continue pursuing what's not working for others." It's kind of a remarkable admission of how this model isn't working at all for anyone, and how maybe it never did, because she's essentially implying that that Africa somehow missed the Green Revolution boat in saying that the ship has sailed. That's what that phrase is usually used to mean. But AGRA didn't miss the boat. It herded African governments and their hungry farmers onto that boat for a 20-year voyage. And that's left them shipwrecked now on a continent-sized island that's now less capable of feeding itself than it was before the multi-billion-dollar Green Revolution set sail. It's a real abdication of any taking of responsibility for the role that she, Agnes Kalibata, and AGRA organization played in taking and misdirecting billions of dollars in government and donor money into this failing project.
Pocket lining. They are lining their pockets. So Agnes Kalibata, what do you think Agnes Kalibata meant by the Green Revolution ship has sailed, Mutinta?
I think she knew. I mean, she lived. She was at the helm of implementing the model.
Right?
And I would like to believe that when this was coined as Green Revolution for Africa, there were some good intentions. And I'm happy that as an African, she really did say indirectly that this has not worked. It has sailed would have meant that it worked and then it was time to move on to something new. But it failed miserably. And unfortunately, even the models that are being promoted now, there is nothing new about them. It's about extensive chemical use. It's about a few conservation farming practices like minimum tillage or something like that. It is just the same. The AGRA may have rebranded, but they have used every resources at their disposal to continue to entrench the same system that they have, whose name they have removed from their moniker, if you like. So, yeah, I believe that's what she meant.
Yeah. Good intentions. We all start with good intentions, I guess. But I don't know. It's just another colonizer. I mean, to me, I'm on the outside looking in. And I don't mean to offend, but it just seems like another colonizer scheme, just to, get in there and get some resources and line some pockets in order to get those resources and then get out. But I don't know. We shall see.
Yeah.
So let me ask this question. Has the AGRA scheme been all the information, all the data that you've collected, Timothy A. Wise, all of the collaborating and gathering of all of that, all of Tim's information into reports, Mutinta in Katani with AFSA, has this all of this been brought to the African Union? And if it has, what are they saying? And if it hasn't, do you have any intentions of doing so? Because the African Union is just that, the union of the African countries, right? And I would assume, I think it's safe to assume, again, I'm on the outside looking in, it's safe to assume that that is what they are doing. They're supposed to be doing, right? Mutinta, go ahead and field that question. Tim, you can go ahead and fill in afterwards. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. There
Hmm.
is a lot that civil society is doing. So yeah, with what team did, there's also another study about financial flows from AFSA, which is complementary to the national data that a team has put together. This shows how funds or resources flow from development institutions like the African Development Bank. For me, it's a typical example of what it shouldn't even be an African Development Bank because it's not developing Africa at all. Flows to private sector institutions, multinational corporations, and others, and
Hmm.
still does not translate into sustainable food systems. So all this information that team has put together, what AFSA has put together, and what we also have another study with Oxfam Novib. All this information is communicated to the relevant, to AU, to the relevant wings of the AU, as well as to the regional blocs such as SADC and ECOWAS and all these other regional blocs. So there are a lot of platforms. AFSA has membership in all the regions of Africa. And most of these platforms are actually aware of our position on the Green Revolution model and why we are proposing agroecology. And therefore, our recommendations on what should be done for a sustainable food system in Africa.
All right, Tim, we got a few minutes left. Go ahead and close us out with your thoughts towards that question. African Union, where are they in all of this? Go ahead.
Well, that's the question that I think a lot of people have been asking from the start because it's African governments that are the biggest funders of the Green Revolution, in effect, diverting their public money, some of it coming from donors, but some of it just coming from taxpayers, into these subsidy schemes and promotion schemes that are just devastating to their people and very costly. So I think it's a very reasonable question to point the finger straight at African governments. AFSA, I know, has been very active in that process, both with it through its organizations. It's a network of a very large number of very powerful organizations across the continent. At the national level, they've been pushing for this, and there have been inroads with national agroecology programs being developed in different countries besides Senegal that are starting to have an impact. But at the level of the AU, they've been active too. The African Union just completed its Malabo period of trying to push these strategies through 2025, and they've just now reorganized that campaign under what's called the Kampala Declaration. And AFSA's been there in that process, trying to advocate for a much more open, much less Green Revolution focused approach. And that process is ongoing. So I think it's really incumbent on, I would hope that AFSA is able to get its report and this data into the hands of African Union representatives and get them to really reconsider some of the priorities that they've set for which really follow the Green Revolution pattern. It's still way too much about increasing input use, increasing chemical use, focusing on a narrow set of commercial crops instead of traditional African crops. The opposite of the kind of diversity that Senegal has followed. And I think Senegal is much more of a model that the African Union should be following.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. So, Mutita, we're gonna have you close us out. You get the last question. You get the last word. So, I, can the land be saved? I mean, it's been turned into this practically desert landscape, right? From all of the reporting that I've heard from these agro-African countries. Can the land be saved? I think it is possible. I've heard that it is possible. Your thoughts? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's either that or we perish. We may not have much choice in that. It's just about changing the attitudes. I think it's an uphill battle in terms of changing people's attitudes towards environmental stewardship, despite the evident impacts of climate change. In the southern part of Zambia, which has suffered the most in terms of this loss of biodiversity and almost desertification, people have been migrating to other parts of the country. So they're migrating from the south to the north, and they're taking with them the same approaches that destroyed where they are coming from, unfortunately. But those that remain are more willing to try agroecological approaches and natural regeneration and so many other practices that would help them reclaim the land. So we are very hopeful that it is possible, especially for those that do not wish to relocate. And when in Zambia, for example, we are developing the National Agroecology Strategy, and we hope that this, once the government has signed off on it, to be the framework that will be, key to this transformation. So yes, we are hopeful that it can be reclaimed.
All right, folks, that is the voice of Ms. Mutinta Nkatani, National Coordinator for the Zambia Alliance for Agroecology and Biodiversity, and Timothy A. Wise. We all know and love Timothy here. He is the Senior Research Fellow at Tufts University Global Development and Environment Institute. Mutinta, Tim, thank you so much for imparting your knowledge right here on A Rude Awakening. Truly appreciate your time. Thank you, both of you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sabrina.
All pertinent links will be on the show description page, including Tim's latest agri-study for A Rude Awakening at kpfa.org. And that does it for another edition of A Rude Awakening. I'm Sabrina Jacobs. A big thank you to my guests, Mutinta Nkatani and Timothy A. Wise, for taking the time. Kirsten is on the controls. I'll be back next week, same time, same place. Stay tuned for a rebroadcast of Democracy Now! Coming up next. And remember, good people, embrace each other as we embrace the mother of us all. Thank you for listening.
Hello, I'm Susan Young, Chair of the Pacifica Foundation Board of Directors. One of the exciting things happening across Pacifica is our National News Service. Every weekday, we're bringing together stories and reporting from across our network, giving listeners a broader perspective of what's happening around the country and the world. It's another way Pacifica fulfills its mission of providing independent journalism and thoughtful coverage of the issues that matter most to our communities. We get to hear from longshoremen in Oakland, a nurse in the Bronx, a farm worker in Ruidoso, a screenwriter in LA, and a school teacher in Washington, D.C. We can hear their own lives reflected back with dignity and depth.
KPFA is the media sponsor of Berkeley Pride, From Joy to Justice, a celebration of the power of the LGBTQIA+ BIPOC community. This event is wheelchair accessible on Sunday, August 30th from 11 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. at MLK Jr. Civic Center Park in downtown Berkeley. Proceeds benefit the Pacific Center for Human Growth, a 501c3 organization. More information is at pacificcenter.org/Berkeley Pride.
KPFA paid staff is associated with the Communications Workers of America, CWA Local 9415.
This is 94.1 KPFA and 89.3 KPFB in Berkeley, 88.1 KFCF in Fresno, and online everywhere at kpfa.org.
KPFA.